So I wanted to deal with this idea of moral equivalence, and the idea that you could look at a particular situation, and if you're trying to defend something that you see, you want to say, well, whoever it is that may be the one who's basically wronged, well, they had some level of culpability for what has happened to them. And this came up in a discussion, and it's not just with one person, but you'll find all kinds of people who are doing it. But what happened last night, and how these two young people were gunned down, unaware of what was going on. They were just innocent people. They were soft targets. They were easy targets, and a very, very evil man came and just took their lives. We saw it happen last night in Washington, D.C. Two Jewish young people about to be engaged. They were going back to Jerusalem next week, I'm sorry. And they were going to go through the formal part of giving, their engagement. And it's wonderful. And you see the two of them. What I've heard, and I haven't had a chance to see it for myself, but multiple people have said they were professing messianic believers. So these were Jewish people who believed in Jesus Messiah. And if that's the case, I rejoice. Not that their lives were taken, well before they ever should have been, but they've gone to their reward, and they're living in the very presence of the God that we're reading about here. So if there's one little bit of good news that's come out of it, we know where they are. So that was a bit of news that I heard today, which I thought was great. So anyway, the guy who did this is typical of like what we're seeing in the college campus protests. He's using all the same slogans, wearing the same ridiculous kufiya that they all wear, and he's basically the poster child for all of what you've seen there, but he took it to the next level. So the people who get into moral equivalence, it's like, well, I understand that this is really bad, but there's always that caveat of, the people who were injured were also culpable to some extent, which is just ridiculous, because regardless of whether they were people who were supporters of Israel or anything else, that does not mean that they should have ever been a target. So whenever I hear the moral equivalence, I'm so disgusted by it, because it's just a ridiculous thing to say. And here's why. If we're going to play the moral equivalence, because of course they were saying, well, look at all the innocent people whose lives have been taken by Israel, and during, ever since October the 7th. Well, if we're playing that silly game of moral equivalence, then we would want to basically be saying, okay, if we're going to take a look at this person who did this and the two young people. And remember, as I'm saying all of this, my problem is with moral equivalence of any kind if there's no way to say it's a straight across example. In this case, it is so far from it. So anybody trying to make the case, to me, is just an absolute fool. And if that offends people, I can't help that. But to me, to make that case is just, that's the height of ridiculous. So here would be, if it's going to be a quote equivalence, their lives were taken, but the people that they're representing, Israel, is taking the lives of people in the same way. Hardly. Because if that was the case, then the person who perpetrated what happened last night would have to be the aggrieved, following the types, and that would mean that the two young people that he took out of this world, that he didn't know, would have had to have been like broken into his parents' house and took their lives, and no, he's doing this in retaliation for them. That would be the moral equivalence. Well, they would have to then be guilty of whatever it is that he felt was necessary that their lives should be taken. That obviously never happened. So the idea that you could start to play that game of moral equivalence is insanity. Take it one step further than that. When you start to think about the people who have lost their lives in the area around Gaza, remember the people who perpetrated what had happened on October the 7th, they live among the people and use them as human shields. But remember, Israel will always tell the people, hey, we're coming, it's best that you get out. Remember, this has been going on for a year and a half now, since Israel went in and started to try to root out what's going on with Hamas. And we don't know the numbers of actual civilian casualties, but let's face it, there's about 2 million people that live in Gaza, and the fatalities, according to Hamas, is in the tens of thousands, or in the 40,000 range, according to them. But they're about as trustworthy as the evening news. So do I trust their numbers? And even if I try to trust their numbers, it doesn't account for the people who were the combatants that were taken out. But Israel takes incredible measures to try to minimize the amount of civilian casualties, but the cowards that did what they did live among the people. And we have to remember the numbers here. There's about 1,200 people that were murdered on October the 7th. If we were to try to understand that in terms that we get it here in our country, given the relative difference between populations, it would be like within the matter of a few hours, more than 50,000 people of our population were taken out of existence because people came over the border. Figure Canada or Mexico, those are our only borders. And can you imagine how our reaction would be if somebody did that in a matter of a couple of hours, took out 50,000 of our citizens here in this country? What would be our response, especially if the people who did that went and lived among the people that are just the civilians? We would do all that we could to try to make sure that those people knew that we're coming after the bad guys who did this, but we can't rest because they'll just do it again. So again, if we're trying to play this ridiculous thing about moral equivalence, fine. If you want to talk about how Israel has done what they've done since October the 7th and you've got some kind of a grievance, that's fine, bring it up. But to try to take a look at what happened last night and find in any way any kind of moral equivalence, you're making a fool of yourself, because there's nothing there. It's apples to oranges. So it's one of those things I've always found that moral equivalence is never usually done rightly. It's trying to make an excuse for the actions of some by looking at the actions of others. Means that you're not taking enough weight and putting it on the people who've done real evil, and then you're overinflating the actions of someone else to try to make a justification for things. So the one thing that we as believers never want to get into is the idea of moral equivalence. Morality and the actions of some need to stand on their own. And to try to find justification for why somebody did what they did, if it's not legitimate reason and justification, we got to quit making excuses for people. And if they've done something that's truly evil, don't try to find a cause for it aside from their own evil, but don't look for somebody outside that should be the cause for it. And if only not for those people, everything would have been different. We know better than that. So we want to stay away from moral equivalence, especially in things like this. Again, when I started to read some of the things from a number of people, it's predictable, but it just is so absolutely dishonest. And hopefully people do realize how dishonest it is and then maybe recalculate. But to sit back and try to play that game is just, to me, it's just dishonest. It's foolishness, and it makes absolutely no sense. So we will be picking up next week in chapter 22. Any questions on the study itself or on the idea of moral equivalence? Contact me. Love to hear from you. oldpaththeology.net is the website, and I'd love to hear from you. So you can contact me through the email at the website.